we'll start the presentation. So again, thank you so much for joining the 2022 Capacity Building Request for Proposals information session. And today I'll be talking about a brief overview of Minnesota housing, an overview of of course, the capacity building RFP, a description of the grant uses, the selection process and timeline. I have some detailed application instructions and tips, and we'll leave time at the end for questions. And I think I will pause kind of partway through the presentation to make sure or to stop and see if y'all have any questions. If possible, please do enter your questions into the chat. This will be used to create an FAQ that will be posted to the website. So it's very helpful if you could please put your questions in the chat. Okay. So I always like to start with who is Minnesota Housing. I see some familiar names that have joined us, but nice to have the grounding that, Minnesota Housing, here we believe that housing is the foundation for success. So we'll collaborate with individuals, communities, and partners to create, preserve, and finance housing that is affordable. And then why are we here? Housing impacts Minnesotans of all backgrounds in all corners of the state. And we know that housing touches all areas of life, education, health, and jobs. So by having this focus on housing, we know that the ripple effects reach far. And then I just like to talk about it, Minnesota Housing, even though housing is in our name, there are several state agencies that have something to do with housing. So I wanted to highlight the ones that we cover here at Minnesota Housing and the Housing Continuum. So it goes from homelessness prevention to supportive housing, providing services so people can stay in their homes, to rental housing, homeownership, and also manufactured housing, which we know is a hybrid of both rental and homeownership at times. And then for a program delivery process, we have a number of resources that we get out throughout the state, often in the format of requests for proposals. And so these can be reach lenders, developers, service providers, and community organizations. The final one is really what we're focusing on today in order to reach all Minnesotans. So again, appreciate you joining us today. It's really through your great work that we can expand our reach as an agency. So now I'll move to an overview of the capacity building RFP. Just to highlight, it's due Thursday, July 7th at noon Central. Again, the session is being recorded, so just please note that. So to just get started, and I should also mention that a recording of this will be made available online. So the Capacity Building Grant Program, its purpose is to fund activities that build the capacity of organizations and communities to address root causes of housing challenges and create thriving and inclusive communities. And it's important that we are centering communities most impacted by housing challenges and disparities as experts in solving these challenges. We know that the housing system doesn't work for anyone, and if it doesn't work for everyone, excuse me. And those that really are struggling are really well positioned to name why it might not be working. So we really trust organizations and communities to use their knowledge and creativity to develop strategies that work for them. And this grant program is an important way that we advance our 2020-2022 strategic priorities, especially focusing on strengthening disinvested communities, including fostering the co-creation of solutions with communities, addressing systemic barriers, diversifying the partners we fund and with whom we work, building cross-sector community development work, and supporting tribal nations and Indigenous communities. And I should note, a few more of you have joined us today. Thanks again for the interest. The recording will be made available online, as well as the presentation. And this is a summary of a lot of the information that you can find in the application overview. So just a quick overview of the Capacity Building Grant Program request for proposals. It's a 2-year grant period. If you're familiar with the grant in the past, it was a 1-year grant period, and we found that grantees really need more time to develop the areas of capacity and projects that they're working on. And there's 2 uses, but applicants can only choose 1 use. It's either organizational capacity building or intermediary capacity building. I'll go into detail a little further down with what those uses are. The funds available are a combined total of up to $1,450,000. Again, it's broken out by each of these uses. And wanted to note too that the organizational capacity building applicants are not competing against or with intermediary capacity building applicants. This is just one application process. You pick either one and then compete within each of those categories. And then I also will note that grant awards of 50,000 or more will have more extensive monitoring. So just wanted to note that for your planning purposes. Next, I wanted to talk about eligible and ineligible applicants. So eligible applicants are tax exempt nonprofits, tribal governments and tribal business entities, and collaborations between two or more entities, so long as at least the applicant entity is a tax exempt nonprofit, tribal government, or tribal business entity. So I'll go into this in more detail later, but if there is a subgrantee relationship, just make sure that the applicant that's completing the application is the one that, if selected, would enter into a contract. And then entities that are not eligible are non-tribal government entities and for-profit businesses. And then I also wanted to highlight some of the ineligible uses. Those include direct housing development and pre-development costs, direct housing services such as rental assistance, affordability gap, or down payment assistance, lobbying or other direct political activities, and shelter planning and/or services. So as I mentioned, there's two uses. I'll be talking about the organizational capacity building use first. So the organizational capacity building is where the grantee will use the funds to build its own capacity to address root causes of housing challenges and housing disparities, build power in communities most impacted, pilot innovative solutions to housing challenges, and support inclusive and equitable communities. The estimated available funds will be $950,000, subject to applications received. The maximum individual award will be $55,000. Although typical award size may vary. In the past, we've seen, a range maybe from $20,000 up to, $55,000. So some examples of how these grants have been used in the past and eligible uses would be piloting projects to test creative solutions to housing challenges, community engagement, education, and leadership development to facilitate a community-led process, partnership development to build a stronger network that can better meet community needs, staff development and training to build organizational capacity to meet community needs as defined by the community. As I mentioned, it's a little complex, so I really wanted to take some time to break down how this works. We certainly understand that with these big ideas of community-led grant making, how important organizations working together can be. But for the purposes of state requirements and for this grant, is just wanted to keep in mind there'll be one applicant that will be the one, if selected, that we'll contract with. But it's important that if any other funds are distributed, it's through a sub-grant process. So there will need to be a contract between the selected applicant and the sub-grantees. And for organizational capacity building, you do need to make sure that those sub-grantees are identified at the time of application. And I'll pause. I did see someone raise their hand. Ideally, if you can put in the chat, that's very helpful. Okay, Jane, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, no chat function, so I guess I'll have to just email you my questions.
Oh, okay.
This happens a lot on Teams lately.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you have a question that you'd like to ask now? I just meant it's easier, but I understand if verbally is the only option.
Can an organization, if they already have a capacity building grant from Minnesota Housing, if it's a very large organization, ask for another one?
If it's duplicating existing activities, no, but if it's different activities, then yes. So in other words, we don't want you to apply capacity funds to the exact same activities that you're already charging to another.
And then regarding it, you said something about it wasn't for emergency shelter. What if it's an emergency shelter program that wants to expand their housing in the community, work with more landlords, increase access for clients that have a lot of barriers? Is that a permissible activity?
Yes, yes, if it's to expand into more housing stability, then yes, that would be eligible. And then Beth, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, Alyssa. Just a quick question. The dollar amounts that you're referencing, is that an annual amount or is that per grant? So per 2-year amount?
It's for a 2-year grant period. And
Okay.
And for intermediary, it's a higher level. So I'll go into see. I do see a number of questions related to the types of uses. Can this be used for housing surveys on a county level? It could potentially be used for housing surveys, again, if it's to carry out the activities and priorities outlined in the grant. Pausing for a moment here, I see one other question in the chat. Are organizations eligible to apply for both capacity building and intermediary capacity building? No, you need to just select one grant, one type of grant use. Right, so now I'll go ahead and talk about the intermediary capacity building program. It might answer some of the questions you have, but if not, I'll again pause for questions. So for the intermediary capacity building program, the estimated available funds are $500,000, again, subject to applications received. For this grant program, the maximum individual award is $75,000. The typical award size may range from $30,000 to $75,000. This grant use could be used to build the capacity of others through pass-through grants and or technical assistance in the grantee's area of expertise and experience. So please note, for this grant program, pass-through grants awarded to subgrantees must be less than $25,000. And again, for this grant use, funds are intended to support efforts to build the capacity of communities and or organizations to meet community housing goals and needs, and also to strengthen the capacity of communities, stakeholders, and organizations operating in the areas of housing planning, community and program development, and community engagement. So just a couple definitions here. When we say that this grant, the intermediary uses for pass-through grants and technical assistance, pass-through grants is defined as money that we award that's intended to be passed in the form of a subgrant to build the capacity of one or more local government entities, tribal governments, tribal business entities, private organizations, and not-for-profit organizations. And then we define technical assistance as those activities which provide training, education, and other supports to build the capacity of individuals, organizations, jurisdictions, tribal governments, and tribal business entities. So some examples of intermediary capacity building uses are community planning activities, such as convening a variety of local stakeholders to identify housing needs and priorities, convening regional housing providers to create a regional market study and assess housing needs, providing technical assistance to community-based organizations to increase organizational capacity, technical assistance and pass-through grants to become certified as a community housing development organization, or pass-through grants to hire a consultant for a housing-related need. I'll pause here. I do see we have a few questions in the chat. So one question is, are local government entities eligible to apply? For these limited funds, we're focusing on non-governmental organizations, so tax-exempt organizations, although partnerships with government entities would be eligible. And then I'm going to pause for 1 second. Thank you. And then the other question is, do we have a list of previously defined disinvested communities, or how will we be defining that? I can provide a definition that's in our our strategic planning documents, and then really defining as communities most impacted by housing challenges and disparities. And then the emphasis of the funding be statewide. Yes, we'll look for a balance of funding throughout the state. And then, as I mentioned, there's also a subgrantee arrangement that's available through the intermediary capacity building. Again, the applicant needs to be the one that would be intending to enter into the contract with Minnesota Housing. And then they would use the pass-through funds in the form of a grant to one or more subgrantees. For the intermediary capacity, the maximum award must be less than $25,000. And also please note for both uses of this grant that the contract must be in place before the grantee can enter into a contract with Minnesota Housing. For the intermediary capacity building, we have certainly allowed intermediary capacity building grantees to run their own selection processes to provide subgrants, but please note that if you don't list the subgrantees at the time of application, then you do need to follow all of the policies by the Office of Grants Management related to competitive grant making. And those links are listed here in the application and also in the documents available on the website. So I know this is a bit dense. Thanks for hanging in there. If you could just, I was going to say, I'd like to pause now if you have any other questions about the information I've shared so far.
I do have one question here for you.
Yes.
I look at your grant, the information, and I was just wondering, so basically, who are we targeting? What demographics?
So the way the grant is designed, we're really looking to the applicant to define the communities that they would like to focus on and target. But again, with a focus on communities that have been most impacted by housing challenges and disparities. I can put the definition in the chat. It's in some of the application materials as well. So basically, you know, we're looking for how, sorry, I was looking at the chat as well. So again, we would look to you to identify the communities that you wanted to work with, but the scoring would take into account who, how they're most impacted. So I'll get into that a bit later, but good question. So there is a request to put the organizational capacity information back up. And then a question, so local government entities can partner with a nonprofit to submit an application that increases capacity for the nonprofit. So yes, a local government entity could partner with a nonprofit applicant. The nonprofit would just need to be the one that would be submitting the application. Again, I'll pause here for a moment.
I'm sorry, one more last question for you. I just want to be specific up here.
Of course.
When you talk about housing, housing is wide. So does it also include rent or mortgage? I just want to make sure that I'm focused on how I'm going to address my proposal.
Yes, so it is. This is broad intentionally, but I understand it can be a little confusing. So it's really all the types of housing listed. So from, you know, rental housing to manufactured housing to home ownership, but really we look to the applicant to define it. What's important is that these funds are not used as a rental assistance or mortgage payment services type entity. And then another question I see here is, can we use the funds to pay consultants? Yes, these funds can be used to pay training consultants. There are no caps on what those fees are, but we would be scoring for reasonableness as part of the scoring process. Another question is if our agency acts as the fiscal agent for another entity, both we and the other entity would like to work on different projects. Would that be organizational capacity or intermediary? Would that be allowable to use one application for more than one activity? So if for fiscal agent relationships, certainly we understand, especially for emerging organizations, that they rely on that fiscal agent relationship to be eligible for funding. The fiscal agent would need to be the one to apply for the grant, but you would then name the organization that you intended to provide the funds to, and again would need to have a contract in place if you were selected prior to entering into a contract with Minnesota Housing. And yes, the application can be used for more than one. Well, let me stop that. If there's several activities you would like to do as part of an organizational capacity building grant, you can list those activities. But again, you can only pick organizational or intermediary. A fiscal agent would be considered an organizational if it's really about the underlying organization would be doing the work, and the fiscal agent is the basis for eligibility. Okay, I'll pause one more moment for any other questions. And again, I'll also leave time at the end if anything else comes to mind. Another question, could a tenant organization apply to pay legal fees in a legal fight with a deadbeat landlord? So the tenant organization, I'll have to look into the use of legal fees. Certain legal fees certainly would be eligible, but if it's to pay for a court case rather than, certain project activities, it would not be eligible. So if you needed to pay legal fees as part of, the consultant role to help with your activities for your grant, those could potentially be eligible, but if it's part of a legal proceeding, those would not be eligible. So next I wanted to just move on to the selection process and timeline, and I will go to, and I'll answer some more questions. Well, I see one more question, then I'll wait till the end for the rest of the questions. Can the funds be used for other direct client needs, such as classes? So no, the funds cannot be used to provide direct services to an individual client. So for the selection process and timeline, we use a process that is relatively unique, even within Minnesota Housing. So there's both a written application process that's scored, and then from there, there is we select the finalists that will participate in an interview. The interview is also scored, and then both scores are taken into, are added up to select ultimately the organizations that will seek to fund. And then I won't go into extensive detail for this, but here is the scoring criteria for the application. You can also find this online in the application overview link. So there's 40% for the project description, and really that's looking at to what extent is this proposal responsive to community needs and designed to address root causes of housing disparities and challenges. Outcomes, again, we're looking at to what extent will the increased capacity address a gap in the housing system and result in outcomes that ultimately benefit communities most impacted. Qualifications, we're looking to you to define how you're uniquely qualified to carry out the proposal activities. If you have been a previous grantee, we will consider your past performance. And again, this goes to, Sam, your question earlier, who to focus on. And again, this is where we score the extent to which those that are most impacted by housing challenges and disparities are involved in the proposal. And then again, more details can be seen later. So the interview phase, everything is evenly weighted with a focus on the project description, outcomes, the qualifications again, and communities most impacted. So wanted to walk through the anticipated timeline. As you can see here, RFP was released last week. We have our info session right now, which again is being recorded and will be available online. The application is due Thursday, July 7th at noon. On or around August 16th through the 18th, we'll conduct the finalist interviews. The Minnesota Housing Finance Agency Board meets on September 22nd, and that's where we'll submit the recommended grantees for approval, issue award letters, go through due diligence materials, and those are all the documents that need to be finalized in order to enter into the contract, with the goal of having the contracts begin on November 1st. So now I wanted to walk through the application instructions. This is somewhat detailed with screenshots. Just wanted to make this as simple as we can, knowing that there are some requirements through government processes. So again, I really want to encourage you to read the application overview and instructions document on the website. It provides very detailed overview, scoring, process pieces and includes the entire application as well. And then to submit an application, there's 2 steps. One is the application information documents. The other step is the financial documentation upload, which is done through a secure site. So just wanted to be clear, for financial documents, never email those documents. For both, please use the required locations to upload that information. So I'm sorry, this is a lot of words, but just wanted to get it all in one place. Again, this is also on the website and in that overview document. So to apply, to submit your application, you would click on the link here. You would complete the applicant proposal and information sections, which again, you can see on the PDF I referenced in the slide previously. And then you'll upload the following: responses to application questions. So those are about 12 questions that you would complete on a fillable PDF, the application signature page, the proposal budget, the proposal work plan, and then if applicable, again, for tax exempt organizations, you would do the printout, quote unquote, of the business records. So you don't need to pay for and request a certificate of good standing. If you follow this link here, enter the business name and saved a PDF of that, what appeared on the page, that's sufficient to verify the Secretary of State status. Please submit electronic versions of these documents. The signature page, if needed, you could print and sign, but everything else we do need uploaded electronically, not printed and scanned. So, excuse me, now I just wanted to walk through a few of the more specific details. So you would click on the application link and read through the first page. It's a repeat of the information you would see on the website. And there you'll also find links to the templates I referenced. Please make sure to save it with the name, the applicant name, and the name of the document. The way that those uploaded files come into our system, we can't automatically link who they're submitted for. So if you enter MHFA budget, we won't know who it belongs to without a lot of extra searching. So again, save the name as the organization name and the document name. And then you'll scroll down that page and you click start to start your application. So this is what you'll see. It'll be first name, last name, email address. You hit submit, and this will take you to the applicant and proposal information sections. You'll enter your name, contact information, and so high level information about your proposal. It's not the in-depth questions that are submitted on a separate document. And then again, these are the documents that you will upload. Repeating again, applicant name, document name, it's very important that you do so. You'll find the location to upload all of these on the last page of the online application. So you just think there's 5 screens total. You'll just click through until you get to the last page, upload this information, and then you'll hit finish to submit your application. So I know it's a bit small, but this is the confirmation that you'll see. Please note, unfortunately, there's some technology rules where we can't send you a confirmation email. So we recommend please do save this for your records. If you do need to make changes to your application prior to the deadline, you can just click on this link and it'll take you right back to the beginning, and then you just select edit. So here's a little sample screenshot of what that looks like. So you can follow the link on that last page, or you could just click the link from the website as if you were going to start a new application. When you enter your name and email address, it'll say you've already submitted an application. You hit edit and you can go right back into the application and change any information you want to change or upload any new documents that you want to upload. But again, what's important is that you make sure that it's prior to the application deadline. So now I wanted to talk about financial documentation. Again, I'm erring on the side of this being very detailed to try and help you with the process. So for applicants and subgrantees requesting $25,000 or more, this describes what financial document that you need to upload. So if it's under $50,000, if the gross revenue is under $50,000, then the applicant should submit a board-reviewed financial statement. If the applicant makes between $50,000 and $750,000, submit an IRS Form 990. Please note, a Form 990 Easy is not accepted. And if the organization makes over $750,000, then a certified financial audit, the most current one, must be provided. This question has come up from time to time about what is a board reviewed financial statement. So for those organizations making less than $50,000, I worked with our accountant to have this, it's example, sample only, nobody's personal information. It just describes the type of information you would want to provide. So list any of the assets that the organization has, any of the liabilities and expenses, and what those total costs are. So you'll want to make sure that it's, you know, for the most recent fiscal year that's ended, the name of the organization, and it will need to be reviewed by the board. So the board president or whoever is authorized to sign off on this would need to sign and date that this is has been reviewed by the board. Now I wanted to go into the process for uploading financial documents. So again, this is required if for non-governmental organizations requesting 25,000 or more, or for subgrantees for capacity building requesting 25,000 or more. So you click on this link provided, you enter this email address. Again, do not email your financial documents to that email address. You'll push start, enter your name and email, select the files to upload, click upload and send. So now I have a few screenshots to hopefully break it down. So when you hit that Leap file link, this is the first page you'll see. So you'll want to select in the red box where it says secure upload. Then you'll enter the recipient email, which is this community development email address. Then you'll hit start. Then at the top of the page, it'll be your name, email address if you want a subject heading, and then you'll scroll all the way down to locate the file upload link. We do recommend you click notify me when the files have been downloaded, just to confirm they've been received and downloaded. And you would just click on the select files to send. So I'm almost done. Thanks for hanging in there with me on this very warm afternoon. Just a few application tips to keep in mind. Again, on the website and linked here is the RFP overview, instructions, and application. Just like you would with applying for a job, you just want to make sure that you read all of the details because it helps you know what we're prioritizing and looking for with this application. Please do start early and allow enough time. If at all possible, please try and submit the application prior to the application deadline in case there's any technology difficulties. Also, again, I see a lot of great partners here on the call. Assume that the only information.
So this one's lower than the floor?
Yeah.
Like we have to try and pull.
Assume that the only information we have is what you've provided in your application. So even if we've worked with you for years, assume that we've never heard of your organization and really make the case within the application itself. And then directly answer the question and be clear and concise. We've tried to provide generous word limits, but you don't need to fill it up. Keep typing till you hit it. By word limits, I mean page limits. Again, review that application checklist and make sure that you've gone through all of the steps. We do build in some checks and balances as you're applying, so you can't hit submit until you've uploaded the required documentation. But again, make sure you're uploading the correct files. Sometimes, unfortunately, we've had applicants that have uploaded a draft and that's the only one that we can score from. There isn't a chance to submit a different one after the deadline has passed. Again, follow those submission requirements. And then the last thing I wanted to note is please closely monitor your email address and have a backup person monitoring in I'd say the week following the application deadline. It may happen that we need clarifying information or some other type of question that we need to get a fast answer on. And yes, noting that the long holiday weekend is right before the deadline, which is one of the reasons we've tried to give a full month for the application, knowing that, you know, of course, summer is we want to enjoy summer. And then accommodation requests. If you need an accommodation to apply, please do contact me at the email or the phone number. Please, if at all possible, submit your accommodation request 7 business days to allow time to process. Please note, please only use that phone number for accommodation requests only. You're more than welcome to reach out with me via email for any questions and we can schedule some time to talk. Given the interest in the program, that's a more efficient way to kind of answer questions and find that time that we can meet and discuss. So we are at the end. Thanks for hanging in there. I'll quick take a look at some of the questions here in the chat. And you can use this time to think of any other questions you might have. Is there a limit to the size of a community? Can it be an 18 county continuum of care? So there's no limit to the size of a community. Community is a broadly defined term from a group of people to cities to counties. We look for that, and then will I be sending out the link for this presentation? This presentation will be uploaded to the website. We'll likely have an e-news if you're subscribed to our e-newsletter, where we'll be announcing that as well. And I anticipate that would be uploaded within the next day or two. Let's see. And then I'll pause here to see if there's any other questions. I'm assuming if you made it to the info session, you know where the website is, but I'll just go ahead and put that in the chat. Just so that it's easy to find. Again, please do take a look. It has a lot of helpful information that I've also shared in the application, but I know it's nice to have a chance to talk through it. Okay, I'll wait maybe one more minute for any other questions, either in the chat or in the hands raised. So can the funds be used to support lived experience consultants so they can attend meetings? Yes. So stipends to community members to participate in processes are allowed. So if it's childcare, transportation assistance, et cetera, for or a stipend for people to participate in different processes, that is allowed. It just couldn't be used, for example, as a childcare assistance check, for example. But if it's for the purposes of the grant activities and for stipends, in fact, we encourage that. Again, I just put the link to the website in the chat. Let's see, I'll wait maybe one more minute and see if we have any other questions. Right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me at that community development email address. Happy to answer any questions you might have there or find a time to chat. Yes, I see the question. This is not tied to the bonding bill. We have a fund at Minnesota Housing that's created through our lending, that's financed by profits from our lending that funds this program. And yes, we will combine all of the questions and answers into a frequently asked questions document, which will also be updated to the website. Excellent question. Thanks for highlighting that. So with that, I'll wrap up the meeting for today. Thank you again for your time and interest. I look forward to answering any other questions you may have. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks. I'll leave the meeting up in case chats come in. Otherwise, you're welcome to leave the meeting. Thank you so much.